everybody, this is Always back with another video on Ionic framework. Now this is going to be the crash course of Ionic framework version 5 because recently they bring out a new version 5, which has some new UI components, gestures, a brand new animation API, new icons, colors, and theming. Also, it has official support for React. So I want to do a crash course for Angular developers. So this is going to follow Angular as a framework, and also we're going to take a look at a new UI components available in Ionic version 5. In this video, I will show you how you can use capacitor with Ionic. We're going to take a look at a couple of plugins from Cordova with Ionic, a native wrapper, and capacitor plugin as well. So this is going to be a quick start guide for Angular developers with the latest version of Ionic and latest version of Angular. So I'm really excited to present you this. It's a bit long video, about 2 hours, but stick around, you're gonna get a lot out of it if you just want to quickly start with Ionic version 5 and you're already familiar with Angular framework. Now, if you do like the video, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And if you think this video helped you and if you want to help me out, there's a PayPal link in the description of this video to donate. Mentioned this is a crash course, so we're not going to cover every single UI component, but we're going to learn how to use and how to explore the documentation and find more about the UI components, how to use them, how to customize them. But let's just say that you want to know some particular UI component that hasn't been covered in this video. I would highly recommend to go through this playlist. This is built on Ionic 4, but things are pretty similar as long as the Angular is concerned. So you find a lot of things in this series. I've covered everything in details, and you will find some UI components being discussed here as well. Also, I have a web projects basically built in pure JavaScript and TypeScript. There's a playlist for that as well. So have a look at that. I've done a lot of JavaScript based tutorials. And one of the most important Ionic playlist that I've done recently, it's a complete mobile application development project-based workshop using Ionic version 5. So there's about 17-20 videos that I would highly recommend go through these. This series I have started from a fresh project and took that fresh project to complete app. So I would highly recommend go through this series. If you are not sure what is Angular and how to use Angular with Ionic framework, I would highly recommend check out my course on Udemy, which is a complete essential guide for Angular. So this will cover everything you need to know to be able to use Angular with Ionic. I'll drop a link for this into the description of this video. Also, there are some Udemy courses for JavaScript that I've done. Check out my Udemy profile and you'll know what courses I've done. Okay, so let's get started with Ionic Framework 5 crash course. Okay, so now we're going to start by looking at documentation. It's ionicframework.com/docs. This is documentation for Ionic. Now you're going to make sure that you select Angular because in this course I'm going to be using Angular. And if you're not sure about Angular, here's angular.io/docs where you can learn Angular. Or you can also take a look at my Udemy course. I'll drop a link for this course in the description of this video, and if you're interested in learning Angular, please check it out. Anyways, so let's go back to Ionic Framework docs. So we're going to be using Ionic Framework, which is a UI toolkit. We're going to need Capacitor, which is the native bridge for cross-platform web apps. Also, we're going to need Angular, which basically is a framework we're going to be using to build Ionic application. So if you're on a Windows or on a Mac, open command prompt on a Windows and open terminal on Mac. So here I would like to first of all make sure that I have Node.js installed. Currently I've got this Node.js installed 12.15. We go to node.js.org. You can download. So this is the latest version, so make sure you have a latest version installed. Next, we're gonna have to install a couple of things. Just move my command from the side. we're going to go to environment setup. And into environment setup, we need Node and npm. And npm get installed automatically with Node. So that's fine. You need to have a Git. If you're a developer, any beginner developer will have a Git installed. Git is a version control system that is, this is basically not highly recommended, but this is something that you need as a developer. And we're going to go and install a CLI. So first thing, we need to install Ionic CLI. So what I'll do is npm install Ionic/CLI. This is going to install Ionic CLI for me. And then I can basically get a new project using Ionic CLI. If we want to create a project with a capacitor, we're gonna be a type tag. So let's just let this finish, and then once we have that, then I'll show you how you can install capacitor globally as well. Also, you have Angular CLI installed, so CLI, this is what you need. So I'm gonna go to copy, and then I'm going to paste that bit there as well. Once we have both CLIs installed, go ahead and install capacitor. Let's click on docs, and I'm going to click on installation. And here is the npx capacitor CLI. Okay, so that's what you need, capacitor CLI. Install that by using so let's do a paste here for Angular. So let me just here add install dash add Angular/CLI. It's going to install the latest Angular CLI, which will basically be used within Ionic. And here we got 9.1.7. That's good. Let's go and install the capacitor. So we'll do npm install dash save. Now this bit is actually something that we can Ionic to do that for us. So on this using Ionic, here we have Ionic start, my app tabs, and here we can say dash capacitor. Okay, we actually create a capacitor project. So what I'm going to do is we're going to create a new project using capacitor and Ionic, and then we're going to start looking at some of the UI components provided by Ionic 5. Okay, so environment is set up now. We got a Node.js installed, we got Angular CLI installed, Ionic CLI is installed. Also, we're going to be using Ionic CLI to create our capacitor project. I'm going to be creating a new Ionic project using capacitor as its type. Now, if I click on these packages and CDN, here we have some information. Before we can create a project, we need to talk about it. So basically, we have a project called Ionic plus Angular. So it says when using Ionic framework in an Angular project, install this Ionic Angular package from npm. This comes with all the Ionic framework components and Angular specific services and features. So this will make it easy for us to actually use Angular in Ionic. Also, you can do this bit, ng add Ionic Angular, which will automatically set up your Angular project to Ionic. Now we have official support for React. I'm not really a big fan of Ionic plus React because React is something that you use with React Native. React has its own cross-platform framework, which is really good. Yeah. Also, we have some Ionic Con CDNs, which you can use to add icons to your project. So yeah, we're going to be using this package, Ionic plus Angular. So I'm going to go to starting. And here it says starting a new app is incredibly simple from command line. Run this command. So if we say Ionic start, okay, it says non-interactivity due to, okay, so we can't just do the Ionic start. We need to type our application name and then its type. So we're going to be using Ionic start, and I'm going to name my application as Ionic tutorial. And I'm going to be using a blank template. I'm going to type dash dash capacitor. Okay, press enter, and it's going to prepare the project for me. And one thing to notice here, it's installing this npm.cmd I, and it's actually installing capacitor code for me. Okay, and also it's installing this capacitor CLI as well. There are a few informations that we can add to our platform by using npx cap add Android, iOS, and Electron project as well. So that's good. I will wait for this to finish the installation, and then we're going to open that into my favorite IDE, which is WebStorm. I know a lot of people will say, yep, that's not really one of the best, but I would debate, because I think WebStorm is the best IDE for any kind of JavaScript development, or Angular or Ionic or React Native. Okay, so project is open. I'm going to open WebStorm, and a WebStorm will have our project opened. So give me a second, I'll get this project up and running in WebStorm. Okay, so our project is open in WebStorm. Let's explore package.json first. So in package.json, we have some dependencies. So we got Angular common package using Angular 9.1.6, Angular core, and also we should be seeing a capacitor CLI and capacitor core package here. Okay, so we're using the latest version of capacitor, which is capacitor 2, and we have RxJS, which can be used in Angular. So yeah, things looking good. We're gonna have to modify a few things in our project down the road to make sure that we have nothing coming from Cordova. Okay, so I'm gonna change the description here. I'm gonna say Ionic complete course project. Okay, right above, I'm going to leave that there as well. Okay, so our project is looking good. I'm gonna open a built-in terminal in WebStorm, and I'm gonna type a command Ionic build. It's going to use this build script from a script tag, and it's gonna run this ng build. At the end of the day, it is Angular project, and the UI kit is used as Ionic. Now we have our project getting built for the first time. Once done, then we will run this project in the browser. Ideally, we're going to be running this into Android Studio emulator. So yeah, I'll just wait for this to finish. So project is built. Now we can use Ionic serve command to run that in the browser. We're going to go through our some of the APIs that are provided in Ionic later. And also we're going to be looking at some CLI commands. There you go. So we have our Ionic project running. Now in the Chrome browser, you can make it look like it's running on a specific platform. If I click on this button after going to the developer tools in Chrome, it's going to give me an option if I want to choose iPhone or Android, which is like a Pixel 2 here, and I can choose the iPhone one. I'm going to move this to the right. Okay. And I would like to look at our code side by side. Okay, I would like to look at the code here. All right, and then I want to see the app there as well. So we know how we can run our application in the browser now. As you can see, the black template is being used. So let's take a look at how we run our application in emulator. I'm on a Windows, so I will only be able to use Android emulator. So I'm going to go to the terminal and stop the server. I'm going to type here a command, Ionic cap add Android. Okay, Now it's going to download the project Android from capacitor, and it's going to add that here. So you see another folder appearing, which will be like our Android project, which we can open in Android Studio. If we go to the documentation, I'm going to take you to some of the commands that are available here. For example, we have a capacitor section. Here we got this capacitor add. Now I can use this Ionic capacitor add, and then you can use iOS, Android, or Electron. Okay, I used Android, and I can also use Electron if I want to create an Electron project there as well. Now, in the short form, you can use just a cap instead of Ionic capacitor. The full word is not required. So now we have our Android project here. Next thing what we need to do is we need to use this command, capacitor sync command. So what it does, it will actually perform Ionic build, and it will copy the web assets to capacitor native project. It will update the native project dependencies, and it will install any discovered capacitor or Cordova plugins. Okay, so we got some options as well, saying no build, which will ignore the Ionic build. A prod, which will be used as a production configuration, will be used. We got some advanced option, like we're not going to talk about these, but anyways. Okay, so that's the command that we're going to be using. We'll come back to this in a bit. So now here, I'm going to do Ionic app sync Android. Now it's going to make a project again. It's going to compile it. Then it's going to update our native Android project. I'm going to open this new terminal here. Okay. I'd like to show you how you can set up Android Studio with all the SDKs and emulator, but that would take up of time. Instead, I would like you to take a look at one of my videos. I go to udemy.com. I can search for something like Ionic and Ionic project setup, any type of voice user. And yep, here is a video that I created like 3 months ago. This is how to set up Android project from Ionic framework. I would like you to have a look at this video, and this will teach you how you can set up your Android Studio with Ionic. It's about 17 minutes. So this will help you to set up your Android Studio stuff. So I'm not going to go through this bit again. Okay, let's go back to the web storm. And here I'm going to take a look at if this is built. Okay, that's built. Now I'm going to use this command npx cat run Android. Okay, and this command is not going to work because we haven't installed capacitor CLI globally. So for that, we're going to use ionic cat run Android. Before I press enter, I want to show you the same command in documentation. So if I go to Ionic documentation, here we have a capacitor run command. You can do Ionic capacitor run, and then you can specify your platform, whether it's Android or iOS. And this live reload flag is amazing. It will basically run your application in an emulator and will automatically link that application to your development server, and any change you make, it will basically update the app as well. So that is really, really good. So first of all, let's just do Ionic app run Android. It's just going to try opening Android Studio now within the project, and we should see our app running. So let's wait for this to finish. Okay, so our project is actually built, and we can see the Android Studio automatically opened. Now, usually you're going to get an error when you have Android Studio not installed properly. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to this actually there's a capacitor.config. Here we want to make sure that we have defined a path for Android Studio if you want that to open automatically, or you can go to Android Studio and open the project manually. Okay. And here I'm going to use this Pixel 3a and I'm going to click on this play button. Once I do that, it's going to start processing. It's going to open the emulator for me. Okay, and once the project is built, it's going to open that into the emulator. There you go. The new project is open. Now I was actually showing you guys other screen. That's why probably you missed some information. Now I'm gonna put this here, okay? And instead of like using a browser, I'm just gonna use the emulator, which is ideal, okay? Because we are actually building an application for mobile, not for the browser. But you could actually run your application in the browser as well and start building the UI part of it, and then worry about the native later. Okay, so here we got this thing running. Now I want to make sure that whenever I make a change, so we're going to go to source folder, app folder, and I'm going to go to app component. And then go to home. And here I would like to say, made a change. Let's save the file. Now, as you can see, it's not updating our emulator. So what we need to do here is we're going to go back to Android Studio. We are going to go to create a build for app. And here we want to make sure that we have a project set up properly. So here it says Ionic starter. Let's not worry about that for now. But what I want to show you here is the capacitor configuration. This one. Okay, it's not populated the way I want it to populate. So what I want to do is go back to the project. Let's stop the server. And I'm going to use a CLI command, which will basically build a project to auto reload for us. So I'm going to use Ionic cap run Android -- live reload -- external. Okay, I'm going to press enter. And the same command is available here. So we say Ionic capacitor run Android. This is where the live reload is. And here you could define external, or you could specify the actual path as well. Now in WebStorm, it's asking me which basically which IP I want to use. So I'm using two IP. So I'm gonna select the second one, which is going to be 192.168.1.102. And we just wait for this to finish. And then we are going to install application again. And you will see the application will auto reload when you have a server running. Okay, let's open Android Studio. I'm going to stop the application and I'm going to go to build, clean build. And I click on rebuild project. Gradle is working hard to build this project for us. Let's just wait for that to finish. And then I'm going to type here, play. One main thing that you will notice in your config file now for the capacitor, here you can see quickly, I'm going to show you this is using the server now. If you go to capacitor config now, you'll see a server which is pointing to this bit, okay, and that's the same server that is running in our terminal. Now if I go to homepage and I say Control Z, save, you'll see it will automatically reload. Now at this stage we have all the things set up for us. We have a blank template which is looking good. We have our emulator running, and now we can continue exploring Ionic components. Before we start our journey with Ionic framework, we're going to understand some basic concept in Ionic framework. So let's just say I have a mobile and I will open an application. what do I see? I see a UI where I could tap a button. I have a card. I have some alerts, notification. I have some select boxes. I have some models. So all of these are actually UI part of your application. And then when you click on the button, there is a code which runs and does its logic. But also the third thing that we need to understand in a mobile application development is the native APIs. For example, here is my iPhone, right? Now let's just say if I want to use a GPS sensor built into iPhone, how do I use that? So that's like a native API available for using GPS. If you want to take a picture from this camera, you're going to use a native API. So Ionic framework has three things. One, it's a UI library itself. So all of these nice components, for example, the card, a checkbox, a chip, all these cards and lists, all are UI part of Ionic framework. Now it has a representation of Android and iOS here. But you see, we have a UI components, and then we have this native functionality. So native functionality is something, let me read this sentence. So build a native powered experience with a collection of open source and premium plugins and integration that makes it easy to add native device functionality to any Ionic app with Capacitor or with Cordova. So let me explain. Now you're done the UI part, you have a few buttons, you want to click on that button and take a picture from your mobile camera. So first thing, you need to design that button, which will be your UI code. And then the second thing would be some sort of framework or language that will act upon your button event. In this case, we have Angular framework. Now, the third thing is an API available to you for a camera. Now, we do that by accessing native APIs provided by Ionic wrapper. And in the background, Ionic uses Capacitor or Cordova. If I click on the documentation here, you see Capacitor link. Okay, click on that, it will open up a new page, and here we have Capacitor, which is really built by Ionic team and also works great with Ionic framework. We're going to be using Capacitor, but also you can mix and match Capacitor with Cordova. Cordova is an old project which provides a native bridge as well. Now, hope we understand what we're talking about here. So one is a UI part of your application. Second is your Angular framework, which is like a TypeScript framework, which helps you to build things in terms of UI and your logic nicely and easily. It gives you a lot of things out of the box. So, but Ionic is compatible with React, plain JavaScript, Vue, and Angulars. We're going to use Angular because it has the strongest support in Ionic framework. I'm going to take you back to a framework itself. Now here in the documentation, we have a guide section which talks about Angular, React, Vue, and using plain JavaScript. We have components, which is a list of components you can use out of the box when you use Ionic as your UI library. So it says Ionic apps are made of high-level building blocks called components, which allow you to quickly construct UI for your application. So pretty much all applications have some sort of UI, and iOS has a different look than Android. This framework is a cross-platform. So if you're running your application on Android, it will have an Android-based feel. If you're on iOS, it will have an iOS feel. So let's take a look at the first one, action sheet, okay? So here, if I click on this show button, you see this is the action sheet native look in iOS. But if I click on Android and click on action sheet, this is how your native action sheet looks on Android. So see, this thing is automatically handled. Now here we have a list of components that we can use. Now, prerequisite for this course is you need to understand Angular, and Angular allows you to create reusable components. This is what's happening here. When you use Ionic with Angular, all of these components are basically Angular components, which are ready to use. And they're really good. They actually provide everything. I've never come across something which is not available here, and I had to create a custom UI for it. So Ionic is a really great library for building UI for your application. Now let's just say we created this action sheet. If I click on that and I bring up with this options, delete, share. Now what happens when I click on the play button? It has to do something, right? So that's a programming language, and in this case, we are using Angular with TypeScript. TypeScript is a programming language. Angular is a framework, which makes it easy to do things like we're using Angular, and all of these components are pre-built within Angular for you to use. We have a CLI, command line interface. So when you are a developer, you know what CLI is, right? So Ionic provides a CLI which helps you to generate projects, generate Ionic, Angular components, services. It gives you a lot more than just, having play with Angular. So here's a list of the commands that you can use. You have some commands like capacitor add, capacitor copy, open. We'll go through these commands later, but here are a list of the commands that we can use. So mostly the command that we're going to be using is going to be Ionic serve, which is this one. Okay, so basically it starts a local development server for your app development and testing. All you have to do is just type Ionic serve within your Ionic project, and you will have your project up and running. There are some flags that you could use, like external, if you want to allow this to serve on your local network so anybody can see that. You can do that as well. So we will talk about this. Now, talking about CLI now, and there we have native. Okay, so here is a list of native APIs available. Now you can see here, for example, if you want to use the camera, I'm going to go to C section. Here's a camera. So it says camera, take a photo or capture a video. Now it says required Cordova plugin. For more information, please this Cordova plugin docs. Now, if you look at the installation section, Ionic is really good when coming to compatibility with Cordova and Capacitor. Now, Ionic team itself is recommending to use Capacitor as your compiler for a project, but you can also use Cordova plugins, which is really nice. If you look at the installation section here, you see we have an installation guide for Cordova, and we have also installation guide for Capacitor, and there's an enterprise grade plugin available as well, which basically gives you a lot more than you get from these open source plugins. Now, you can use Capacitor or Cordova depending on how you're going to build your project. If you're using Capacitor as the compiler of your project, then please use Capacitor. Okay, here's a guide for that. Now, using this plugin is kind of same thing, but it's just more like installing when you have a Capacitor-based project or Cordova-based project. Don't do Cordova anymore. That's not really a good idea to go with Cordova once we have a capacitor. Okay. So here's a list of native APIs. For example, call directory, call logs, call number. Okay, so call number directly from Cordova Ionic application. The IO simulator do not provide access to phone subsystem. Okay, that's fine. So here's a vast list of native plugins that are available. Now we're going to be looking at some of the plugins available in Capacitor as well. So let me take you to Capacitor. Here is a list of APIs that Capacitor provides, and this is really good because it's most likely it's like a native code that you can go and modify as well. So use Capacitor plugins as much as you can. If something is not built yet and you're not sure about the native code of Android and iOS, then you are okay to use Cordova-based plugins. But to me, all the basic functionality like GPS, a browser, camera, clipboard, console, device, file system, you got network, a permission, a push notification, or sharing options are basically available in Capacitor. So you don't really have much to look for. It's available here. All the basic plugins are available in Capacitor. So that was an overview of our things available in Ionic framework, and I hope it gives you an idea what Ionic is. So UI, Angular as a library, a framework, sorry. And then you have a native bridge, which is Capacitor or Cordova. Both works alongside, so you can install Cordova project, Cordova plugins within Capacitor. Okay, so let's start over generally by looking at some of the UI components now. Now let's try a couple of components before we move to creating some layouts in our Ionic application. So I'm going to use button first. So let's go to the documentation for button. So here you can see Ion a button. This is what we need to be able to create Ionic button. And here you can see an example, how it's going to look like on iOS, and Android example is available here as well. So Ionic automatically handles the styling depending on a platform that is running. So we don't have to worry about that. But also we can specifically specify that we want to target iOS or Android. Now we'll have the discussion later. Now we got some API here. For example, we can use these attributes, expand attribute. You have two options, block or full. You have a fill, which basically an attribute which holds the background and the border color of the button. Okay, if you take a look at this documentation, it's pretty much, straightforward. We have a size that we can define. We also have a usage. Right now, if you notice, we are looking at the React, but we're not using React in our Ionic app, so we're using Angular. So I'm going to click on Angular, and now we get an examples according to Angular. Here is a default button. There's a lot of other examples as well. For example, here we're defining a secondary color. We have a shape set to round. We have, expand set to full. Okay, so now let's go and copy, let's just say this one. Okay, I'm gonna copy this. Let's go to WebStorm, and here I'm going to paste that button there. I'm going to save. A server is running. It should update our emulator automatically. So we're going to go and open emulator. Now there you go. We have a button there now. I click on that. Doesn't do anything because we haven't wrote any code. But here you can see we have the button. Let's try some APIs. So we go back to the browser and we can see we have expand to full or block. Here it says block will basically have full width button with rounded corners. A full width button with the square corners and no border at the left and bottom. Let's try that. I'm going to go and go inside the tab. Let me just zoom in a bit. And I'm going to use expand tag. Now WebStorm is really, really good because it gives you suggestion what are the attributes available, what API is available for Ion button. So it's really helpful. I'm going to type full. Now in emulator, you can see by defining this full, we have a full width of the button, which is looking good. Now I can change the text for the button. So I'll just say test button. Save. Emulator will update. You see a test button as a text. I'm going to use block as expand value. And there you go. Now we got a block with the rounded corners. Let's bring up some other. Let's choose the other API. So for example, we have this shape set to round. Let's go and try that. So I'm going to use shape. I'm going to say round. Let's see what happens. There you go. You got the round shape now. Let's try some other API. So we have fill to outline. Fill. We can set outline. Let's see what happens. And we have an outline kind of button. In the documentation, if these are some usage examples, where you have a full list of properties available. For example, you specify the color for the button. You can specify if it's disabled or not disabled. There's a download property as well. Expand, we used it. Fill, we used it as well. We have a mode that we can define. Now, right now it's running on Android, okay? But if I go all the way up, you'll see a difference. So here it's gonna here's our button looking on iOS, and if I click on Android, this is how they're looking on Android. So we can define a mode specifically. I'm gonna go back to WebStorm, and first of all, I'm going to get rid of this fill and shape. All I want is a block button. And now you notice we have a block button. I'm going to simply give it a size to large. And then I'm going to apply mode. And we take a look at what mode's available. So if I go all the way to the properties, we want to find out what is mode. So mode is iOS or MD. We'll type iOS. Let's save that. Now you see the button will look different. There you go. You see a little bit more rounded button there. Okay. If I change this to MD and save, now we have a little bit, less rounded on the corner. So you can see how you use a component. Now, these documentation are really, really helpful. I would highly recommend spend some time reading about these components and at least find out what's available to you. Later on, if you want to probably take a look at something that is already done for you and you don't have to write this custom CSS for that. So that's why this documentation is really, really good. Now, we haven't gone to the looking at CSS custom properties. How do we use them? We go to slots, which basically will be used in Ion item. Yeah, this video was like showing you a basic component, which is Ion button, and how to use it. It's fairly simple. All you gotta use copy that usage and then paste it here and then look at the API, what's available to you, and utilize that. Next up, we're going to be creating a tabs UI. Now, usually you have two kinds of UI in mobile application nowadays. One is a side menu that pops up and you can select the menu, which takes you to the specific page. Other one is having tabs at the bottom of your application, and you can tap on that to go to a specific page. Now we're going to set that up. I'm going to take you to the documentation again, and we're going to go to guide. In guide, we have a layout section, which is really good in terms of keeping the information that we require. Now let's talk about structure. So Ionic framework provides several different layouts that can be used to structure an application, from single page layout to split pane views and models. Now we have two things, header and footer. Go back to our code. Here you can see we are using header. We have our Ion content, which is like your main area of your page. And then we have Ion footer as well. So let's add that there. Now, if I type something like this, it's going to go at the bottom. Okay, there you go. You can see that the footer is at the bottom. Even though if I bring up the keyboard, I'm not sure how I bring up the keyboard. I need to probably have an input field selected. So let's not go there. Now, but we have a footer. There's three things. This is your header. Okay, that's your main content area. And here's your footer. To define, to actually show you what exactly it is. So we're going to define some sort of like a color for a toolbar. So let's just do a color. Let's just say dark. Save it. Okay, we got the header. Maybe I want to go with danger. It'd be more visible. There you go. That's the header. And for the footer, we can define a color. We don't have a footer color, but I can use this on toolbar, and that will take as, for example, a button, and I can say that would be, I don't want to do a color here, but I can just do like submit. Let's save that. Now you'll have a button at the bottom. I'm going to use expand as full. And there you go, we have a button there. I'm going to specify the color for that as dark. And you'll notice we have a bottom footer and it has a button as primary color, but you can specify the button color as well. For example, if I type dark here, now we should be able to see a button at the bottom or in the footer. Okay, so that's good, and I would like to go and continue working on tabs UI now. I'm going to delete some of the code from here, so we don't need this button. We don't need a footer for now. And let's save it, and we make sure that we don't have anything in our page except the header. Now, in terms of title, I would like to actually change the title to tabs view, or maybe tabs layout makes more sense. Save that file. Now, inside our Ion content, I would like to have an Ion tab. So Ion tab is a component. If we go to documentation, I can move down a bit, and here you see tabs layout. There's an example here. It says a layout consisting of horizontal tabs can be used to let the user quickly change between content views. Okay, and then we can use the Ion router outlet for that as well. Now I'm going to basically copy this code, and I'm going to go back to WebStorm and paste it here. Let's save, and let's see what we have. Now you can see at the bottom, we have a home tab and then we have a setting tab. This bit here is basically just the content. If I just get rid of that and also get rid of that, and I save it, and you can see no more text here. Now this Ion tab we'll talk about later, but what we're interested in for now is this Ion tab bar. We have a slot attribute which we can define to actually say if it's going to be on the top or at the bottom. So if I use top and save, it moves all the way up. As you can see, we have some buttons there on the tab, but usually this is always at the bottom. So we'll just do undo and move that to the bottom. I'm just going to copy this and I'm going to paste that. And here I'm going to change the title to account. And there you go, we got a text here, account. We've seen how we can create the tabs. Now we're going to take a look at how we can create this menu using Ionic framework. So here I can click on this menu hamburger button, and then it pops out this sidebar, I would say. And then you can click on any menu to go that specific page. Okay, so let's install the application first. So I created a new instance of emulator. This is why I have to install it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use the command. I'm going to do cd Android, and here I would like to do Gradle W, and then I can say install debug. Now this is going to build the project for me, so I don't have to open up Android Studio anymore. I can just use the command line to build the project for me and then also install that. Now if I take a look at the package.json file, this is our Ionic tutorial. That's the name of our application, and this is what we're expecting. So if I go and find this application, this is what it's okay. Now it's also looking for this server because we need to have that server up and running. Also, I'm going to do one thing is I'm going to type Ionic cap sync Android. It's going to update the Android project. And then also I'm going to go to capacitor configuration. Here is our server. Now, because probably I created this project in a different computer, or maybe I have a different IP address previously, so that's why it's not, accessing this one now. So to fix this, I can simply go and run this Ionic cap sync Android dash dash live reload dash dash external. Okay, now let's see if it updates this. Otherwise, we can open CMD and we can see IP config. And right now, my IPv4 is 192.168.1.113. That's my IPv4 address, and that's what I can use here. So now if I see it didn't update, so what I can do now is I can simply type 113 here, and then I can say Ionic cap sync Android. Once that syncing part is done, then we can use the Gradle command to install that again. Gradle w install debug. And let's see what it does now. Okay, it did installed. So now I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go open a new terminal. I'm gonna type Ionic serve dash dash external. Now once our server is up and running, I want to make sure that I don't use the browser. It doesn't open the browser. So here's a port, and it should be targeting this 113, which is our IPv4. Now you see the browser was open, and then we see the app is running. I'm going to close the browser, and I'm going to open Ionic tutorial, and now it's targeting this 113, and there we go. We have our application up and running, and it's also linking to this server now. We've seen how we can create the tabs. Now we're going to take a look at how we can create this menu using Ionic framework. So here I can click on this menu hamburger button, and then it pops out this sidebar, I would say, and then you can click on any menu to go that specific page. So in our code, I'm going to remove this tabs layout. Let's save. And then also I'm going to change tabs to menu. We don't really need to say full screen. So now I'm going to show you how easy it is to actually create a layout. It's very, very easy actually. So I'm going to take you to the documentation. Here I've used this tabs layout, and then also they have I would say a sample code that you can just copy paste to build this menu layout. How easy it is. Now I'm going to just copy this code, go back to it, get rid of everything, and paste that code there. Let's save the file, and now we should see a header with this button. Click on that, and it opens up this menu. So as you can see how easy it is to create that. Now I'm going to show you how you can add more items to it, and also how it's been built. So let me explain. So first of all, we have this Ion app. If I take a look at this app component, basically the Ion app is there, and then we're using the Ion app again. Now this thing is supposed to go to app component. So we have Ion router outlet, and if you go all the way down, here we have a menu controller. Now this Ion app is probably not required. Let's just try getting rid of this. I'm gonna save, and now still header still works. Okay, as you can see, no need for that Ion app. Now we start by looking at this Ion menu. So there's a component Ion menu. It has a content ID set to main content. And then we're starting with the header and then the Ion toolbar, just a generic Ionic component. Then we start with Ion content. Now here we have a list, and then this is where we finish our menu. Up to this point, we have this hamburger button code, which makes this menu and then the navigation part of it. And then after this menu, we start with our page, which is this page. So here I've got this on page with the main content ID. Also have some, main content. So I'll just say testing. I'll save it. and this is the page that's going to get updated. And even the header is inside this because we're talking about this page now. All right, so this is how you create a simple Ion menu in Ionic. But also, I would like to show you before we jump to using some component. Here we have a split pane layout. A split pane layout has more complex structure because it combines the previous layout. So I would use this split pane layout over Ion menu. It will still create the same look, but it has some more complication, which we'll talk about down the road. So I will try to just get this thing, and then I'm going to go back, and then instead of this code, I'm going to paste that. I'm going to save this, and let's see what we have now. And there we go. So now we got the menu, something like this. The code is a bit different. Code is in like Ion split pane. Okay, so now before we move further, let's take a look at how you can add menus here. So it's the same thing. It's just adding this Ion split pane before the Ion menu, and it finishes with that as well. So here we have this home, and here's a Ion item. We have the Ion menu toggle button. So now if I go to here, that's a title. So I'll just say main menu. I will change that. Now here we're starting this Ion list. I don't want to start Ion list actually, because if I look at it, it has this navigate thing here. So let's just get rid of that. I don't want to have a header there. Let's save this. Now we have a straight up, icon and the menu. I would like to leave the menu, the icon here, but I want to get rid of this line there. So in Ion item, which is a component here, I'm going to get rid of the button, actually leave the button there, and then have a class. Okay. My bad. That was not a class, that was lines, and you say that to none. Click here, and you don't see the line there. Now here we got this Ion menu toggle button, and then here we have the item there. So if I completely get rid of this, you will see the menu, but you won't see any item there. So what we can do is, if you know Angular, you can go and create a list of items, and then you can use ng for here, which will make it easier, and you can pass in a lot of content there. Now let's uncomment. Before we wrap up this section, let's go back to the documentation. And I would like to show you here. So it is important to note that the element ID matching with the content ID specified by Ion split pane will be the main content and always be visible. Now this can be done with Ion nav or Ion router. Now, if you know what kind of layout that you want from your application, the easiest way is to use the starting template. Now, if I go to documentation and I would like to go, okay, Angular overview, build your first app, and then where we create an application, here is we creating an application. Here you see the type of a template. Okay, I'm going to grab this bit. I'm going to go back to the code. I will create a new project just to show you guys. So I'm going to go to File Explorer. I'm going to go to Dev, and I'll just go to Tutorial, right click and open Git Bash there. And I would like to just paste that. And then here, instead of tabs, I would like to use some other template. So let's take a look at starting. And then here we have tabs. side menu and blank. I would like to use the side menu. Let's go back and I'm going to paste that side menu there. I'm going to press enter. Now it's going to create a new project for me. It might be a bit smaller for you guys, so let me zoom in. What the command was is Ionic start, photo gallery, side menu, type Angular, and it's a capacitor project. Now it's just creating the project for me. I would like to just show you the code, what kind of menu it creates, because it's going to create a side menu, but it's going to be a bit different than that we did. So I'm going to pause the video, and once the project is complete, then I'll show you. Okay, so the project is created. Let me open that up in the PyCharm. So I'm going to just click on open. And here we have a photo gallery project. I'm going to open that into new window. And let's take a look at what is a code, how the code is looking for menu. So here we got this app component. Now take a look at when you create a blank project and comparing this project, it's a bit different. This is the way to do it. This is the right way to start your side menu project. Okay, so in app component, they're starting with Ion app, and then they have this Ion router outlet, ID main content, and then they're putting that into Ion split pane. Then they're doing a menu here. In the menu, I'm not gonna run this project, but let me just explain to you what I was talking about here. So here we got this inbox list, and then we have a list header, which is inbox, and then on node, on menu, and here what I was talking about is ng4 here. So if I go to app pages, you see all of these pages are listed as an array, an object, and then it's an array of object. It has an icon and then title and a URL as well. And then we have a labels as well here. And then we got this, a window location path name, which basically is going to load that bit there once the application starts. I could actually show you guys. So if I do Ionic serve, let's see how it looks like in when you run on a browser. It takes a bit of time when you're compiling, even though I have a very strong computer. It's still taking a bit of time. I wasn't expecting to take this long to compile because I just upgraded my PC with 32 gig of RAM, and it's a very high-end processor as well, Ryzen. So here you go. So as you guys can see, we got the menu and we got this title and then the section there as well. You see how cool is this? Out of the box, ready to go. Let's stop the server, and now you see how they've done it. You can have a look. So basically they're creating an object, array of objects, which requires some URL and a name, and then the menu icon. And then you have this Ion item, okay, router direction root. So you can have a look. You see everything is here. If we take a look at the folder, and here you see we have an Ion header, and then this is Ion content, the same way that you do. Now, if you want to add, more pages, or you want to add routing, so you go to app routing module. Here you will redirect to. So it's redirecting folder / inbox. And then if we take a look at here, we have this folder :ID, which basically becomes your inbox on the go, where you can go through this, dynamically populate this. So this template has been updated recently, and I quite like it now. So yeah, give it a shot if you're starting a new project with it. Okay, now let's move on testing some of the components. I'm not going to go through it every single component. I'm just going to show you a couple more how to use them. One of them would be the card, and then we can use a couple more, but most of them are very similar. They're just Angular components. Copy paste the sample and try to modify the way you like it. So now we're going to take a look at UI components in Ionic 5 framework. Now, I'm not going to go through to every single component, but we're going to quickly look at differences between these components. Some of them are fairly easy to use. For example, Ion button, which we already seen. You just got to copy paste an example, go through the documentation, and you know what's available to you. Some of them are going to be created in TypeScript code. Start by looking at action sheet. So let me take you to the documentation. Now, action sheet is fairly simple. Let me teach you how you can read the documentation. Every component you click on takes you to its documentation. Here they have a sample, for example, how it's going to look like. So this action sheet is going to look like this. So every time you open an iPhone, usually you tap on some button on your application and something come up like this. So this is what we call action sheet. Similarly in Android, if I click on that, it's going to look like this. Now this UI is automatically handled by Ionic framework, which is great. Now we read some documentation here, so you have an understanding how to read the documentation and explore more. So let's just say a button. A button role property can either be destructive or cancel. Now it's telling me some customization. So now here is a usage section which every component have. In the usage section we have Angular, React, Stencil, Vue, and JavaScript. Here's a simple example. So I'm not going to copy paste this example, but let's take a look at how we can utilize action sheet. Let's go to PyCharm. In Chrome on the side instead of emulator because I want to be able to switch between iOS and Android look of Ionic. So now we're going to be creating a button here. So let's just create a button. I'm going to type message click to show action sheet. I'm going to save that and you'll see a button in browser. Right now it doesn't do anything if I click on that. So what I want to do, go to TypeScript file and I want to create a function. So say show action sheet and that's it. Now let's utilize this function in our HTML file. So I'm going to call a click event on this button. Now this is going to come from just the Angular click event. And I'm going to call this function show action sheet. Okay, let's go to TypeScript file. Now the way action sheet work is by importing its controller in your component constructor. So I'll use public. I'll say action sheet controller. I'll say action sheet controller. Now, as you can see, PyCharm is one of the, I wouldn't say one of the, but the best IDE for JavaScript or Python. JetBrains IDEs are amazing. They actually have really good IntelliSense and increase my productivity. Like I'll be writing less code and just using the suggestion from a PyCharm, you will see or you'll notice in this tutorial. So now here we are going to first of all create action sheet constant variable. I'm going to set that equal to this dot action sheet controller, and there's a method on it create, and that takes in an object. Now we're going to make sure that we are using async function, and we're going to need an await here. So I want to wait before I go to the next line. So I want to wait that for action sheet creation. So in the object, I press Control Spacebar in PyCharm. As you can see, it's pretty good. It's showing me all the properties available, and yeah, that's really, really good. So first of all, I'm going to use the header. I'm going to say custom action sheet. Next, I would like to maybe have a subheader. Let's say custom subheader. Then I'm going to call buttons. A button is going to take an array, and that will have, first of all, a text. I'll just say cancel. It can also have a role as cancel destructive selected string undefined. I'm going to define a role as cancel. Now this thing is throwing an error. It says missing white space. Okay, well, this is the white space that it requires, so that's fine. I can just ident it using Python. All right, I didn't do it properly, so we'll just leave that for now. We'll fix the indentation later. I've got role, and also I can have a handler which will take a function, and I am just going to call this handler. I'm going to just simply say console.log, and we can pass in button. Okay, handler button was clicked. And now we should see an action sheet with this button. So I'm gonna click on action sheet now. And right now, as you can see, it's not presenting. Okay, so what we need to do once we create action sheet, we want to await and we want to say action sheet dot present. Okay, there's a present method on it. Now if I click on this button, it shows the action sheet and I can click on the button there, okay? And then it should say handler button was clicked. Now this is good. Let's go have a look at the documentation. So now we've got text, role, icon. So if I use the role as destructive, now we might find a button action sheet button class that we could probably see the documentation there. But for example, I'm going to just use descriptive. Okay. And then I'm going to click on action sheet. I'm going to click on this button. Okay. Now basically it's not really doing anything. I'm going to have to cancel out by clicking on cancel button. And it says handle button was canceled. I'm just probably going to zoom in a bit. So it says handle button was clicked. So that's good. As you can see, we can create buttons now. So this is how it's looking. Custom action sheet, and then we got a subheader, which I'm going to get rid of. And all I need is just a button. Okay. There you go, cancel button. Now if I just, let's just say copy, let me just add a comma here first. And I'm going to copy this and paste this a few times. And we should see a button. Let's just say click. I would say submit. Let's save that. And now if I click on this, it has 3 buttons now. I can click on this click. It says handle button was cancelled. But let's just say, I'm going to say click button was clicked. And I'm going to say submit button was clicked. And I can say here, cancel button was clicked. Let's save the file and let's see what happens. Now let's click on action sheet. I'm going to say click, and it says click button was clicked, and then cancel button was clicked. Now let's take a look at how it's looking in iOS. So if I go and change the device, so show device frame, nope, doesn't do much. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to zoom out a bit, and I want to just go here and then click on iPhone 11. Let's refresh, and there you go. Now it's showing an iPhone. I'm going to click on that, and now you can see the action sheet is looking like a iPhone action sheet. Also, I can click here and I say just hide device frame. That's fine. I don't want to see that. Actually, it looks nicer, so I can just have that and show media queries as well. So that's good. So now if I go back and I look at the pixel, let's refresh. I want to make sure that I show, nope, Android does not have that. That's bad. Anyway, so you can switch between iPhone and iOS now. So as you can see the difference, that's looking good now. Okay, so you make sure that you have to refresh to see the actual, changes to the view. So now let's go to documentation and let's read more about action sheet. So here you can see we have a CSS class that we can define. We can pass in the custom CSS class from our parent component, which is good. Enter animation. You have an animation API in Ionic 5, which wasn't present in Ionic 4. So now you can use, animations. We can define animation the way we want. A keyboard close. Basically, let's just say your application is running on actual device and you click on a action sheet, and if it was a keyboard, the keyboard was appear, it will make sure that it will close that keyboard. Okay, and we can define leave animation. We can specify the mode. So when you specify the mode, for example, let's go to the code and I'm going to define a mode here. And I'm going to say, just choose iOS, please. Don't worry about Android. So when I save the file, now if I go and change to Pixel 2, I will refresh, make sure I refresh, and then click on that. And you can see the action sheet is still coming as iPhone. Doesn't matter you're on Android or iPhone, the action sheet has this kind of UI. Now, it's not a good idea to specify mode manually because, people are used to with their device or operating system look like Android. People have their feeling about, look of Android, and iPhone once has the iPhone feel. So you better not define the mode unless you really need to. Okay. So that's good. Now we have some methods. So every component has some sort of a method. We can see how do we use them. So now let's just say if I want to basically do something after dismissed of the action sheet. Once the action sheet dismisses, I want to do something. So the way I do it, I'm going to say action sheet dot dismiss. Okay, not this way. So I'll say on did dismiss, and I'm going to call a function, and that will take let's just say no parameter, but I'm going to just say console.log action sheet dismissed. Now I want to see the documentation why it's giving me an error here. So it says on did dismiss. So what you do is on did dismiss, and then you pass in. Okay, so what you need to do is this. It's a promise overlay event. So let's go back to the code and see what's going on there. So if I just see expected 0 argument but got 1, so okay, that's fine. I'm going to remove this bit. I'm going to say equal to, or actually this is going to be dot then. And we just get that inside, and then I'm going to add another one here. Okay, that should fix this now. Okay. So it was a promise. So you could not just pass in as an argument, but you had to call this as a, dot then. All right, now once I click on action sheet comes up, and if I just dismiss it, it says action sheet dismissed. So I say I dismissed sheet. All right, I'll just leave the typo there. Let's save and let's see if that method triggers. So if I click on that, get out, and then it says I dismiss. So you can see you can use these methods. Not all the UI component has this method, but wherever you find it, you can use it. Now, if you don't find any method and you find an event that triggers after a certain action happens. For example, it says Ion action sheet did present. I want to make sure that the action sheet, when it presents, then I want to do something. Now here, I don't see any method which let me see if the action sheet was actually presented. So I'm going to copy this line and I want to show you how you can use that. Now, just before this, we are going to call action sheet dot add event listener, and we do this. Use that text there. I'm gonna have a function. Now I can say console.log, and I will say action sheet did presented. Okay, I'm going to save. And now when I click on action sheet, and if it presents, it will log this method. So let's click on that. And it says action sheet did presented. As you can see, I'm listening to that particular event. Now, all of these things are basically Angular things. If you know Angular, you should be able to do this easily. All you need to know is how to read the documentation. That's the reason why I'm spending a lot of time and showing you how to use the methods, how to use an events, and what are the properties are available for that particular component. Now we pretty much covered a lot of things in our action sheet. Now let's move on to a next. So let's just say we look at alert now. Now alert is again something that will be created by its controller. Let's take a look at buttons. Buttons have something like URL, email, text area. So what you can basically do is you could actually create an alert. You can ask for a confirmation, yes or no, you want to do something. For example, you want to click on a button to log out from an application, and you want to make sure that the user understands that he's logging out. You want to double check. So what do? You present an alert by saying, hey, can you please confirm that you really want to log out? And once that's the case, then you basically call a handler method. So let's take a look at how do we do that. So here is a good example for the alert as well. So if I just go and copy this, I don't want to spend time on it because you would already seen how to use controller. Let me zoom in a bit. So this is an example that I'm saying present alert confirm. Okay, let's go back to the code, and after this I'm going to paste that code there. All right, now here it says alert controller is not there. So what you need to do is let me just go to the constructor function, add comma, into public alert controller. As you can see, PyCharm or WebStorm will give me suggestions. Now let's add alert controller. Nope, alert options by alert controller. Okay, now problem solved. Okay, now what we need to do is we need to go to the HTML and let's create another button there. And instead of calling the same function, I'm going to say click to show alert. And here I would like to call a method which says present alert confirm. All right, let's go here. I'm going to click on that button, and there you go. You got an alert. Click on OK. It says confirm OK. Click again. Click cancel. It says cancel. Blah. Now all of these things are done here. So you basically have an API which you can use to define properties, and then you have buttons where you can say, cancel button or OK button. That's just like a text there, and you can pass in a handler that once that button is clicked, what you want to do. Usually it's not just confirm, cancel, blah. It's a big logic that you perform on this. So that's really important to understand Angular. So yeah. Now let's go to the documentation again, and let's quickly look at what it provides. Now you can see you can do a lot more than just the OK and cancel. You can have like a full inputs. Let me just put those inputs, all of those, just before the buttons, and we see what's going on there. I'll put inputs, I'll save, and let's click on alert, and there you go, big alert. I can pass in values. Okay, I can do a date picker right there. I have some attributes, and the way we handle the data from this input is by having this handler, the OK handler. You see this one? If you define a cancel role as cancel, then you won't get the data there. But if you have the other button, it will have the data there. So you just got to use this handler function. But have a look at this example. This is what you probably will have to. There's a radio button example there as well. You got checkbox example. So this is like really kind of like a big component which provides a lot of things. Same thing, you see we have all the properties here. I want to go to events, same kind of events, that's how you're going to use. And then you got methods that you can use those methods as well. And something that we haven't looked at is CSS custom properties, which you can basically modify by just using these properties. This is like an Angular thing. I don't want to go into details, but let's move on. Now we have an Ion badge. Ion badge is very simple, no controller required. Just use this particular thing. Let me just copy this. It's just a simple Angular component. We go to the home page. I'm gonna go here, I'm gonna paste that badge, and let's see what we see. Color warning 55. There you go, that's the badge there. Simple. It has some properties as well. You can define the colors, you can define the mode, and you have some custom CSS property. So right now the mode is a bit circular, not circular actually, a rectangular. So if I switch this to iPhone 8 Plus, let's refresh, and you will see a round kind of like badge. I can change the color to primary. You can see in the documentation you can change colors and you can change the mode as well. Very simple. We already looked at iron buttons, and ripple effect is something that you can pass in as ripple parent. This is just the CSS class. Try it, you will see what the ripple effect is. Now I'm gonna show you card. Card is one of the most important UI component, which can be a bit complicated. It can be used with other components like iron item, iron label. Okay, this is the really something that you need to learn to master your UI part of your Ionic application. So let's go to the card documentation. All right, so here's an example. It's showing me this is how it's going to look like on iOS, and now it's Android. Okay, so cards are a standard piece of UI that serves as an entry point to more detailed information. A card can be a single component, but it's often made up of some header, title, and content. Ion cards is broken up to several subcomponents to reflect this. So here's some of the examples that are available here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to copy one of the card from here. Let's go to Python. I'm going to go to TypeScript file. Let's get rid of some of the buttons here. I'm going to paste the card there. I actually didn't copy. So let's go and copy this bit, and let's go back to Python. And I'm going to save the file, and let's see the card appearing. All right, so there you go. We got the card there now. Now what this card has, first of all, it has a card tag. Let's call it card component. If I click on that, it takes me to its low level and card, and it's like a component. Okay, let's not worry about that for now, but this is an Angular component. Now it has an card header. Now card header can take a subtitle and card title, and the look that you get it is this one. We have a card content. So you start by having a card. If you want to have it subheader or title, subtitle or title, you put them into iron card header. And then you start with iron card content. Let's go back to documentation. And here are these components that are being used in the card. We have something like on card and item there as well. So I'm going to copy this one. All of them are like, it's like a card related components, but this ion item is something that we need to talk about. So let me just paste that example there, and let's save the file and we'll update our mobile. There you go. So you see the card now. What's happening is ion card can have ion item. Ion item is a block level component, which means it has a full. If you're not sure about the block level element in HTML, I would recommend stop this video and go learn HTML first. Okay, so it's a block level component which takes up the whole space. Now here you can see ion item. It has an icon and ion label. Now when you put this ion label outside and save this, as you can see, it's still in the card, but it's not going to be visible. Why is that? It's in the card, but why not available? Because it's inside the ion card, and ion card can take a certain components, not all of them. So if I put something like, blah text, it will appear. Okay, there you go. But look at the UI part of it. It's really small. It's not really reflecting the native Angular, or I would say not Angular, but native iOS or Android kind of component. So it's very important to use a certain UI component inside certain UI component. So if I use an icon outside the ion item, it doesn't work. So you can see that to learn more about these kind of things, you need to make sure that you read the documentation completely. To find out more about ion card content or ion card header or subtitle or title, you can click on those and it'll tell you what you can, what properties or what methods they allow you to apply. So let's just say ion card header. So ion card header is a header component for ion card. It is a mode, and then this property transcodant. Subtitle, same thing. Card title is kind of like, you can define a color for that, and then the mode. So if I go and define a card title, let me just get rid of this one. And we go to ion card title, and I'm going to use a color as primary. Now it's going to have like a bluish color now. There you go. So you can see, go and read the documentation. Always make sure I have a documentation open when I'm working on Ionic projects. So let's go to Ion checkbox. Very simple. I don't really have to show you much about it. You can have something like, just a Ion checkbox. It's a simple component. I'll just paste that here and save this, and you will see the checkbox will appear. So there you go. Right now, it's looking like this. Okay, but if I just go and cut this and then paste it inside the ion card, and now we got the checkbox there. Okay, very, very easy to read documentation. Here is a Angular is being used here with ng4. You can go through and look at that as well. Now I don't want to go through every single component because we have seen action sheet, we've seen ion button, we've seen the ion card. So here are basically just all the components that you can probably go and read about them. Let me show you this ion grid, which is like another most important. So if you understand Bootstrap or any UI library in JavaScript, you should be able to pick up Ion Grid very, very easily. It's basically a 12-column layout grid. So a grid can have a row, and the rows will have columns. So it's like this. That's a grid. It has a row, and that's just a column there. Now you can define 12 columns within one row, and depending on the column left, it basically will go to the next line. Here's an example. So you can see we have on grid and then the row and columns. Let's go and try this one after this card. So let me make up some space. I'm going to start by using ion grid. So within ion grid, you define ion row. And then within ion row, you have ion column. I'll say 1. Let's make 2, 3. I'm going to save this and let's see what happens. There you go. So we got column 1, 2, and 3. Let's go back to the documentation and maybe we can find something like, you could do a color maybe. All right, you can't do color. No, you can't do color. So if I take a look at ion grid row, that doesn't even have the color property. Maybe ion column, if there's any background property that we probably could use. Nope, that's not really, it's allowing me, so I'm just not gonna do that. I'm just gonna use this. So here we got this ion cell start. You can define a size there. I'm trying to find something on this one. So let's copy this and then paste that here. It will justify or align items center. And within ion column, I need to justify this. And then pass in as center. Let's see what happens. Nope, doesn't do much. So we'll say ion text center. Let's see if that does. Alright, that does it. So I'm going to use ion text center. Now this class is coming from CSS utility section. Let me just get rid of this one. Now also you can see we got this 1, 2, 3 having the same space. Let's just say if we want to give this like a 2x space. So I can define a property size and I can say give it a 6 columns. And I can see it's been stretched to like, taking half the space. And then I'm going to say, let's just say give it like a 10. And those other two will be stretched like really close. So they have like a 1 column each now. So it's a 12 column grid that you can look at. There's a property size to define a column size. We got some CSS properties. So this is really, really good. If you go to guide section and you take a look at this responsive grid. Here they explain how it happens. So you got to define a size. Now also you can define just something like a breakpoint. So size / breakpoint. So let's just say I want this one to have 6 column if the size is something a medium. So I'm going to say here size -md. I'm going to say 6, otherwise 10. Let's save it. Now you can see it's taking 10. Now if I increase the size of this and let's just say maybe make it iPad. Once I do iPad, you see the size changes. Now it has like a width of like 6 column width now. I'm gonna make this as responsive. And now you just notice if I just make it smaller, it will take a 10, and if I go a little bit wider, then it takes a 6 column. So you can see you can define a grid size by defining SM small, MD for medium, and LG for large. Now these breakpoints are pretty good if you're on a mobile, then SM or MD on a wider screen, and if you want to just do a tablet version of it, then you do LG for the large. And you can also read about breakpoints available. So let's go here. We have this access. Don't get access screen for SM 576 pixel, for MD 768, which is like an iPad kind of area. LG is like 922, and then XI is like 1200 pixels, which is like I don't know, maybe your 1920 by something, a laptop kind of thing. Then we have a default breakpoints. Have a look at these. You get an auto layout column. So it's really explaining what it can do. So I've shown you how to read documentation. So we don't want to spend time on it. I just want to show you this Ion icons now. Now, if I go to this and I'm going to, within this column, I'm going to use Ionic icon, and it will take a property name, and I'm going to just say person. Let's save that. I will see a person icon appearing there. So there you go. And I can say size for that, and I'll choose a large one. So you see the icon coming in. But if you go to the documentation, you see this Ion icon. Click on this. It opens up another page, which actually a separate web page, ioniccons.com. Okay, now this thing has a list of icons freely available with Ionic framework. You can use the field shop or outlined one. All you gotta do is just click on that and then see the name and then use that name. So if I copy and I'll just paste that there, and just to see, I'll use a size as large. Let's save it. And I will see folder outline. So there we go. We got the icon. So icons for the Ionic is coming from this website. Let's go back. Now I will show you guys item now. Item is another important UI component that we need to talk about. Okay, so I have a different getup because it's the next day that I'm recording. So we're gonna talk about Ion item now. So items or elements that can contain text, icon, avatar, images, inputs, and any other native or custom element. Generally, they are placed in a list with other items. Items can be swiped, deleted, reordered, or edited. We have a clickable items, detailed arrow items. We got item placement, so we can do like a start, end, or none. We can do a text alignment within items. We have a input highlights. Now here is a list of a usage. So here with a simple item, we have item as a button, item as an anchor, and item as a secondary color. We got detailed arrow, we got the list of items, we got item lines. As you can see, there's a lot of usage examples, and I've never come across something that I had to do which is not available in this sample code. So I would highly recommend, if you want to understand how the items are used with different components, I would highly recommend go through this and you will see how the item works with Ion label or Ion input. Okay, so one thing to keep in mind that Ion item is the block level item. I'm gonna copy some of the usage here and paste in our code. So let's go to PyCharm, and I'm going to paste that sample usage code, save the file, and you'll see your item. So the first item is simple item. It's a block level item. You can see you got Ion label inside it, and that's how it's looking. Okay, you can do something like a slot. We can do end. And if it's inside some other toolbox, then it will go to the end. We'll talk about slots later, but this is one of the property that available in Ion item. We got the label, we got this button type item, so you can click on it. It has a ripple effect there. You got this button which takes you to sorry, not the button but the hyperlink which takes you to a certain website. So here's an example. I don't want to waste time on this showing you how it's gonna look like. You can try them out, try copy pasting code and see if that helps you in terms of designing your UI. I have a separate series on Ionic components in which I show you how to make the UI in a certain way by using by mix and matching some UI components from Ionic library. But this crash course is something that we just want to quickly finish and know how to use these UI components. So here we got, some other examples, like for example, media items, if you want to put them like this one. So you can do an item and you can add a label, and then you have a template which has an image. And just to show you, let's copy paste the code, and this is how it's going to look like. Okay. So again, try them out and then you'll see what you can do. So icons with items, so it's very easy. Now let's go down. We have some properties. We've seen the button, which makes the item act as a button. It has a ripple kind of effect. It becomes tappable. Okay. We got the color properties, which you can use primary, secondary, or if you have a custom theming involved, you can do that as well. Detail. So if the detail is true, the detail arrow will appear and it defaults to false. So you have to specify if you want to have like a detail. So sometimes you want to have a tappable item which you tap on and it goes to the next page. We're going to make it look like an arrow, which basically shows the user that you can tap on it. Okay, so we got detail icon, disable, download. So there's a lot of properties here. You can take a look at their description and see what they do. We got some shadow parts of Ion items as well. If you want to access the native HTML button or anchor or div element which wraps the child element, you can use this. And now we have some CSS properties. Okay. We got slots which we've seen end and start. Basically, if you have a, let's just go back. I'll show you quickly. I'm going to clean up some of the code from here. Okay, I'm going to save the file, and here we got this simple item. So for example, I'm going to add another item there. Okay, I'm going to make a copy of this, and I'm going to say item 1, and I can say item 2. And let's just get rid of this 2. Now you can see you're gonna see two items there, item 1 and item 2 within an item. Okay, now if I use the slot property there, okay, and I want to make sure that this item 1 goes to the end, so I'll type end, save, and you will see this item went to the end, and this automatically be aligned if you haven't specified the slot. So if I type start, it will go to the start. So basically it's an alignment horizontally that you can do with the slot. So it works within an item. Alright, so try to go through this and then you will know what to do. Some of the other sub item things like items divider or a block elements that can be used to separate items in a list. So here's a usage for that as well. So if you inside the item you want to have like a item divider that you can use, it's already built for you, and it's got some properties as well. Go through this, you'll get there. So the next UI component we want to take a look at is Ion model. Ion model is one of those components which are going to be used a lot when you're developing Ionic applications. A lot of times you have a buttons where you click on, there's another page comes up, it has its own thing, you do your thing and then you just close that. So Ion model is one of the complicated one here as well, and also it is very useful. Take a look at the documentation first. So it says a model is a dialog that appears on the top of the app content and must be dismissed by the app before interaction can resume. So basically you click on that, the page comes up, you do your interaction, you close that to go back to your application. We got dismissing, so the model can be dismissed after creation by calling a dismiss method. Okay. We have on dismiss function that can be called to perform an action after the model is dismissed. Some customization available for CSS, we'll take a look at later. Now let's go to the usage. Now we got Angular usage. That's make sure that you look at Angular usage, not the JavaScript or React. So here we have a model controller. It's the same thing as action sheet controller to create model. And then here's a function that can be copied and pasted in our code to create a model. Now let's go and try this first. So first of all, I'm going to go here. I'm going to right click and I'm going to use Angular semantics in Python. And I would like to create a component. And I would say test model component. Okay, so that's the component. We're gonna go and add that to our app module. So it's still running. Let me just hide this. And here we are going to put that component. Actually, not here. We're gonna go to the home module. That's where we want that. So I'm going to go and add that to a declaration. So that would be test model component. And also we're gonna have to add that into entry component. So if I type entry, I'll leave it empty for now. Let's see what it does if we don't put that into entry component. All right, so let's go to our home page.html file, and I'm going to create a button here. Okay, and I'll say click to show model. And I'm going to say present model. The function doesn't really exist. So what we need to do is we need to go to the home. And here, first of all, let's clean up a bit. So I'm just going to zoom out in the code and I'm going to get rid of some of the code from here. Also, I want to get rid of this action sheet and action controller. And now we're going to zoom back into our code. Let's hide this bit. Now inside the constructor, we want to use public, and I'm going to say model controller. PyCharm is amazing. Shows me suggestions, so I'm going to just press enter. It automatically imports that for me, which is great. And now I'm going to do some function here. So let's just go back to the documentation, and I'm going to copy this function and then paste that here. Okay, here it says model page. So what I would like to do is we want to have a test model component. As you can see, it automatically imports that, and it just does everything for me automatically. The PyCharm is great. I'm really liking the idea. Okay, so now if I click to show model, it brings up the model. There you go. But it doesn't have anything. So we're gonna go to this test model component, and here you see there's just a text. So I'm gonna use Ion header, and I'm gonna do Ion I would say title, and then we add this Ion content there, and I'm gonna say here full screen to, we haven't added that into our entry component. So I'm gonna say test model component. So we got this Ion header. If I just have a button here, it says dismiss, and we can call a function like dismiss. I will create this function later. Now let's see what's going on there. So we got this async function present model. Let's go verify this is the one. Once we click on that, it should go and create the model with this. And we have this my custom CSS class. I'm just going to get rid of the my custom CSS class. And I'm going to click on that. And there we go. We got the dismiss button there. Now I'm going to take a look at this bit. I'm going to copy this. And instead of just having that header, I'm going to paste that there. And for the title, I would say test model. Now we should be able to see the same kind of, a toolbar up there. So that's good. Now, how do we dismiss? We need to have a button to dismiss this, right? So we're going to create this dismiss. We're going to call this dismiss function. I'm going to rename this to dismiss model. Let's go here, and I'm going to add public model controller. And then we're going to call a function dismiss model, and we simply need to call this.model controller.dismiss function, and that's it. And once we call this function, okay, click and dismiss, and there you go. So you see, you can call the dismiss function to dismiss the model. Now, there's a lot of other things that we could talk about, for example, passing data into the model. So here we got the component props. You need to know Angular. I'm saying it again because without Angular, you won't be able to follow this tutorial because I'm using Angular as a framework. Now, if you go to your model creation here, you can pass the data there as well. Now, this component props is basically a data can be passed into the model, and then you can handle that by using input decorator. So we're going to use this input, and then what we're expecting, let's take a look. So we're expecting first name. All right, so I'm going to use first name. Let's paste that here, and that would be type string, not underscore, but just first name. Now, once this model gets created, I would like to go to ng initialize, and then we'll say console.log first name. This.first name. Okay. Now I want to show you in the console that once this model generates, it will have a Douglas. If I go back and change this to my name, Awais Mirza, and now you will see when I generate this model, you will have Awais Mirza printing on log. So you can see you can pass the data into the component as well and handle that with input decorator, which is coming from Angular. Again, need to know Angular. So here we got the sample as well. So here you can, add this to the component that is acting as a model component. You got this dismiss a model. That's what we already did. We have some lazy loading options as well. So you got to put that into declaration. And we have some export as well, which you can use to lazy load. We got swipeable model. So swipeable model works on iOS. So model in iOS mode have ability to present it in a card style and swipe to close. So there's a lot of things that you could do. Have a look at this documentation, and then you will get an idea how to use this thing. Same events we've seen in action sheet, methods that we can call on our instance that we've seen already. So yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Now let's go to component section, and here we've seen action sheet, we've seen iron buttons, we have seen iron cards, we've seen iron grid. Now all of these are very simple to use. The most important and complex one I've already shown you. For example, iron menu, how to use that. Other than what we've seen are pretty much a UI based components. For example, if you want to do something like a list reordering, so here we've got list reorder that you can actually reorder things. So that's reorder, and if you take a look at this usage code, copy paste, and you would be able to reorder. So I will toggle on, and I can see I can reorder. There you go. So if you want to create something like this, you can do that with iron reorder. Now we got one thing to cover, date and time picker, which is like the most important one. Sometimes, the date and times are everywhere in development. So here we're gonna go to usage. Let's just copy this, and I'm going to go to the home page. I'm gonna paste that there. And now if I click on date and time, it will open up, an action sheet, I would call it, and you can select a date and time. Now, you need to be able to read the documentation. So we have a display format. So display format properties specify how date and time value should be printed. So you can just have a month and a year. You can have a month and year like this. You got this English, like a 3-letter month, and then the year. Also, we have a zones that you can set as well. You got a picker format, and you got date and time data that you can get. And here's a lot of examples. So I don't really want to spend time here showing you. Its samples are pretty great, and you have pretty much everything. We already talked about how to use properties, how to use a method on them. There's gonna be some events. For example, this Ionic change event. Okay, so I would like to call an event here. So I'm going to first of all go to home page, and I'm going to just create a new function. So I'm going to say log pick date, and I'm going to grab event. Okay. And then in the event, I'm just going to log the event. Actually, we can just say value. Okay. Now we're going to go to our HTML. I'm going to zoom in a bit. And here I would like to call ion change. Okay. I'm going to call log date. So I'm going to pass in, I'm going to create a local variable to say picked date, and I'm going to pass in picked date dot value. Okay, now it's gonna grab the picked date. So let's just go and change the date. So I'm gonna select this date, August 1, 2019. Done. And there you go. Once you have that, date changed, and it automatically triggers this ion change event, and then it will actually call this method and pass in this pickDate.value, which will give you a value that you selected. So here to the 190801. So if I change to 2016, done. Again, this ion change triggered, and you can see the data in your log. So you can see that you can call these events in your HTML code as well. So we got the CSS properties there. Now, a lot of the UI components usage are the same, and we don't really need to spend time. If you know Angular, you should be good to go. If you know any Bootstrap, you should be good to go and read the documentation and know how to use this. The next part we're gonna take a look at is native APIs. Native API documentation page, you can see on the left the list of plugins available. For example, if you want to know information about the device, you can use this device plugin. It accesses information about the underlying device and a platform. It's a file plugin which lets you write and read files from your device. Also, there's a lot of plugins which are really helpful. For example, this Firebase plugin. So if you're using backend as the Firebase for your application, you can use these plugins, and that will make the job easier for you to talk to Firebase, which is really good that it's here. We got a geolocation plugin. If you want to talk to GPS of your device, you have that API available to you as well. There's a lot of plugins available. Also, I would like to point out capacitor. Capacitor is basically alternative to Cordova. You can mix and match, we've already talked about, but I would highly recommend use capacitor plugins over Ionic, because this basically is the future. Also recommended by Ionic community. Okay, so this got the same kind of APIs available for us to use. For example, this device, which gives us, information about your device and a platform. You got an API for models, so you can actually generate models. And the difference between this and Ionic models is like this is going to be your native model on the both platform for Android and for iOS. It's gonna generate a native code, but when you use the models from Ionic, that's just like a JavaScript running in the browser in a web view of a mobile. So that's the difference between this model and Ionic model. Now we're going to start by looking at how do we use a plugin in Ionic native wrapper. Okay, so I will show you guys this device plugin, which let's find out how do we install this, how do we use this in our code, and how do we grab our device information and the platform information using this plugin. The installation section of a documentation, you will have three options here: Cordova, Capacitor, Enterprise. Enterprise will only be visible if there is an Enterprise plugin available to do the same thing. Capacitor will be available if this has a capacitor compatibility. And I would say most of the plugins that you see here, for example, AdMob. Okay, oops, something went wrong. Link is broken, so Alipay. Yep, and then you see the capacitor version is there as well. So it's basically the same Cordova plugin, but installing it in a different way than Cordova. So we are going to use capacitor because this is a recommended way of generating your native projects now. So every plugin that you see here will have a capacitor installation of it. So make sure that you click on capacitor and then use these three lines to install that plugin. So I'm going to first of all copy this, go back to the code, and I'm going to open up a new terminal, or maybe I stop the server and let me zoom in a bit. Let's clear and paste that line there. I haven't actually copied it, so I'm going to go back and paste that line there. Press enter or return on a Mac, and it will install that Cordova plugin for us. And once the installation is done, then we need to install Ionic native device wrapper, which wraps this into, Ionic native thing. Let's install that as well. Now, make sure if you are installing it for like later use, make sure you use this save flag. Right now, if I actually do npm install, and I won't see this device plugin here in the list of dependencies because I haven't used the flag, which is like, save. Now, this is supported for Android, browser, iOS, macOS, and Windows. Okay. That's all right. So we're gonna take a look at the usage of it. It's fairly simple. You gotta just copy this line and let's go and use this in our home page. So I'll go to home page. Let's get rid of some of the functions here and let's get rid of model controller. Let's paste that line. I'm going to get rid of this and use this public and then inject that. Okay. And I'm gonna use ng on init. So ng, so let's just do implement first. And then we are going to just right click, show context and implement all members, click OK, and you have this function there. Now, once this component gets initialized, I would like to call this dot device dot, and now I'm going to use this UUID. And then I'm going to log that to the console. Let's save. And now once our project is running, I'm gonna do Ionic serve, and now we should see when the home page comes up. Also for this test model, I'm gonna get rid of it. We don't need that anymore. We go to the home module and there's gonna be an error because that doesn't really exist anymore. So I will just get rid of that from here. And also I'm gonna get rid of from declarations. Let's save that. Let's get rid of the import there as well. And now if I refresh the application, I should be able to see the device user ID. So it says null, okay, null, no provider for device. That's all right. Now here, the documentation doesn't tell you, okay? So what we need to do is we need to go to app component, sorry, app module, and in the providers array, we need to define device as, uh, now this is coming as capacitor core. We don't want to do that. So I'll go back to home page. I will copy this, paste that here, and then I will add that device. Okay, now let's save it. And now let's have a look. There we go. So user ID is null. Okay, that's fine. If I would like to log a platform, so let's close some of the files there. I want to see what's available. I want to see what's the platform it's running on. It still says null. Okay. What other options that we have? Let's just try getting a model. Okay, still null. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually run this on emulator. So the script or the command that we want to do is adding our native project first of all, and then running that into an emulator. So for that, I'm going to use Ionic capacitor add iOS. This is going to generate a project for me, and then I can use another command, which you can see if you go to Ionic documentation and click on CLI, you have this capacitor add command, which we haven't gone through the CLI tutorial yet, but we will. So I'm just showing you this little command which will generate this iOS project for me. And then I'm going to run this from terminal. Okay, the project has been generated. Here's in a command that is suggesting. So npx cap open iOS. So what I'll do now is I'm going to say Ionic cap run iOS dash dash live reload dash dash external. It's going to build a project. It's going to start an emulator for me, and then it's going to live reload and connect to my, this Angular or Ionic project. So every time I make a change, it will automatically be changed there. Now, instead of here, I would like to go to home page. And first of all, let's get rid of this button. I'm going to use interpolation from Angular. So double curly braces, I will say this dot device dot user ID. Let's save that. And now we're just waiting for Xcode to start. And then I'm going to run this on an emulator. So I'll use this iPhone 8 emulator. It's just building right now. Okay, the project is ready. So I'm going to click on this play button. And the first time when you compile the project, it might take some time, but it eventually will start and we will see the user ID coming up. Okay, build successful, and I'm expecting the emulator to come up. There you go. That's our iPhone 8 emulator. Application starts, and we should see a user ID because we're using this interpolation there. Okay, so there we go. We have a user ID there. I'm going to see the platform as well. So I'm going to save this, and we should see iOS as a platform. There you go. So maybe we can do in Ion item, move this, cut this and paste that here. And then we can have Ion item again. And then I'm gonna just cut this bit, paste it here. Let's just push the terminal down and let's save it. And now we got iOS, and we also have this. Now the theme it's taking is dark. I'm actually going to change that from variables, and here it's accessing light, but I think we gotta have to change the Mac version because it's automatically taking that from the operating system. So you can see that we could read stuff from our device plugin. Now if I just copy this bit, and we can say what is the model. So if I just save the file, I should be able to see iPhone 8 here. So it says iPhone 10, something's wrong with the emulator, but as you can see, but it's still reading the values from it. So this is how you use a native plugin. We go to the documentation, and also I'm going to show you one more plugin, which is this camera plugin. Now, this might not work. iOS camera requires permission to be placed in a config exam. So it might not work in an emulator, so we might don't want to use this. But if you go to the documentation here, this is very simple. It's just very easy to actually use. You got a lot of plugins that are available here, guys. I would highly recommend to go through. Just click on that, and you will have a usage there. And if you have any question related to any specific, you can drop a comment below. Now, the last thing we want to take a look at is some of the CLI commands. So here's the capacitor CLI commands. Once you have the project up and running, you could actually sync it by using capacitor sync command. So it basically performs a build, it compiles the web assets, and it updates your native platform. So that's one of the important commands that you need to remember. And those are the commands as well. Have a look at them, and you'll be able to get them. Now we're going to move to capacitor plugin. The same thing I would like to do using capacitor, and capacitor has this device plugin as well. An example here, I'm going to copy this code. We're going to go back, and here I'm going to clean up a bit. I'm going to paste that code that I copied, and now here we got plugins, and then we're accessing const device, and it's setting equal to these plugins. Okay, so now what we can do here is we are going to create a function, async function, say get device info. Okay, and we can just say any. Now I'm going to say this dot, actually we can do return. Yeah, we can actually do that. Return await device dot get info. Okay, and now let's save this bit, and we're gonna call this function. I call this function, I want to get rid of this return, and I'm going to say info equal to this, and I'm going to console.log, and then I'm going to log info, and then we can return info there. Okay, let's save. And once the ng only the component get initialized, I'm going to call this dot get info. Okay, and let's see in the log we get the data. Okay, now I'm actually going to just call this function asynchronously. So we'll do something like it's really a bad idea to call this function, and then I'm gonna just do async here, and I should be able to see the data there. There you go. And it's calling like a million times. We just gotta get rid of this. It's just gonna slow down the computer. It's not a good idea to call that. So as you can see, it called like a million times. So we don't want to do that. So what I'm gonna do now is close this, go back to localhost 8100, and it's actually caused a lot of issues. So what I want to do now is I'm gonna say this dot uh, let's just say info, and I'm gonna set the value to any for now, and then here I will say this dot info equal to this. Okay, now we might want to use interpolation for info. Let's see what happens. There you go. It's again the promise. So I will have a flag there, which I could probably use this as a JSON. Let's save it. And there you go. That's the data from our plugin. So you can see iPhone platform is web and app version. It doesn't show. So if I take a look at the app as well, so it's showing everything here as well. So now you can see how do we use the plugins from Capacitor as well. So it's really great that we have some project like this. We got some permissions plugins as well. So I would highly recommend go to the Capacitor API, and also for your community-based plugins available in Ionic native wrapper, which are like mostly Cordova-based plugins, but they're really good. It has a vast community and it's been there for a while, so you're gonna find a lot more plugins there instead of just sticking to Capacitor. So yeah, that is it for this crash course for Ionic. Uh, Now, I would highly recommend check out my YouTube channel. I have done a lot of Ionic-based tutorials. Hey you guys, what kind of tutorials that I've already done? If I go to my YouTube channel, I would like to go to my channel Awais Mirza. I'll go to Awais Mirza channel, and here if you see in a playlist, you have this mobile app development playlist, which basically is a series that I worked on. It's like a full-fledged application from start to end. It gives you a lot of Angular-based stuff as well, like unit testing and using components and actually designing it. So I would highly recommend use this one. Also, I have some, you know, done this complete Ionic 4 tutorial. So if you are really missing out something in this tutorial which I haven't covered, like any UI component, go to this tutorial series and you will see that component being discussed in that video as well. So yeah, I would really recommend try Ionic. It's a great platform to build mobile applications. And also subscribe to the channel, like the video if you do like it, and yeah, talk to you guys in the next one. Cheers.